Hello and welcome to this episode of StoryBank 15. It's 15 minutes of conversation with a thought leader who is going to help us think different, but more importantly, do different. And today I'm so excited for my guest because he is a change management expert and leader that we are going to learn from today. Keith Wyche, with a dynamic career spanning of over 30 years. He is someone who has had a 30,000 foot view as well as an in the trenches experience with some of the most iconic corporations through transformative change. Having delivered bottom line results for industry giants like Walmart, AT&T, IBM, and more, Keith has risen to the pinnacle of corporate success as a president and one of the highest ranking African-American executives in the United States. I am just so excited to be having this conversation because, as we know, we are going through some serious times of fast change. Leaders are bearing the burden of so much, and Keith is someone who is going to talk to us about how we make change happen. We always talk about the why of it, the passion of it, but Keith is someone who has lived it, who has done it, and he is an incredible speaker on this topic, and I cannot wait for you to learn some stories and strategies. So with that, Keith, welcome.
Mirjana, thank you so much, and I appreciate that warm introduction.
I'd love to start with this idea of leadership, right? You have been a leader for many years. It is a tough role to be in, most certainly today as things are changing so quickly. What are you seeing as some of the key challenges that leaders are facing today, but also the key inspiration points that they could draw from?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mirjana. And I have to tell you, having been in corporate America for over 40 years, actually, I joined when it was really more leadership, command, and control. What the leader said was not questioned, and it was just go execute. We've evolved to more of a servant leadership mentality, but even within that, there's so many challenges. And I'll just give you a few of them. The first is I call the generational challenge. We have at least four different generations now in the workforce, from baby boomers like myself down to Gen Z and what have you, and they think and behave and act differently. So you have that challenge. You have the challenge of technology. Think about the fast-paced change of technology. 2 or 3 years ago, no one was talking about Chat GPT or AI, and now it's on the lips of every leader. And so you have technological challenges. You have what I call social media challenges. And the 24-hour news cycle. So as a leader, you have to really wrap your head around all of these things, not to mention the performance of the business. And so it's probably never been a tougher time to be a leader. You layer over that the pandemic and the whole work from home challenges that we still face. And it's quite a daunting task to be a leader in this current environment.
You've had a deeper passion for performance for many years, and I'd love to understand a little bit about your background, where that comes from, and how you've been able to carry that through for more than 40 years in your leadership roles.
Yeah, it really was born out of my childhood and playing sports. And the reason I say that is because it's about winning or losing, and you keep score, right? And so, when I got into the work world, it was very important for me to understand if I was winning or losing. And so today, companies look at that, and it's everything from what's my stock price, what's my NPS, my Net Promoter Score, what's my net cash flow, all these EPS. And so it's one of those things that to be successful and to be a sustaining entity, you have to create value, you have to create profits. And so keeping score has always been a way for me to know how I was doing, to know how my business was doing, and to know how I was being perceived by my customers.
It's a good thing I have my kids involved in sports, right? But it's an interesting time too, because some people don't want to gauge success just purely by the numbers. Are you old school on that in that way of approaching it, or do you balance it with what people need in terms of some of this emotional intelligence, psychological safety? They want to be able to touch on their values and their passion points. How do you merge the two and bridge that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mirjana. And it's really, again, part of that challenge of leadership. Because on one hand, particularly if you're publicly traded, you do have to answer to the shareholder. However, in order to do that, you have to really embrace the human capital, the people that you have under your direction, to make sure that they can perform and be at their best. And so, 40 years ago, there was no subject like work-life balance. Well, those things matter now. There were no thoughts about, mental health and those things. And so if you really want to get the most out of your organization, it starts with taking care of your people. And if you take care of your people, they tend will take care of your customer. They'll take care of innovation. They'll do a lot of the things that the business needs to move forward. But it is challenging.
Leaders have to kind of go through their own growing pains of what it means to be a leader and how do you show up for your people and yourself. And you shared with me very vulnerably, and I loved it, that maybe you weren't the easiest leader at first. Can you tell us a little bit about that story of your leadership then and now?
Yeah, it's funny. Typically, when you start out as a leader, you're really mimicking the behaviors of some folks that are leaders before you. And so, I had a leader early in my career who was that command and control. I'm the boss, get it done no matter what. In fact, I'll never forget one time we were in a meeting, probably about 4 hours, and I asked the question, "Hey, are we going to have lunch?" And he said, "Lunch is for the week." And so, imagine, taking that leadership style as a young leader in particular, was not very well received. And to the point where, fortunately, a senior leader of my team sat me down and said, "Hey, you have to understand that, you're getting the results, but you're breaking a lot of glass along the way, and you're really turning people off." And he said, I'll never forget, he said, you want to be a leader that people follows, because if you don't have people following you, you're not a leader. You're just a person taking a long walk.
I think that's so critical, having your leaders come to you when they're seeing sort of some of those challenges and expressing that. Have you been able to also take that approach when you're leading people, to sit them down, to really say, hey, you're doing great in this, but we got to watch out for that?
Yeah, often as leaders, there's a joke that we're like pigeons. We fly in, we crap over you, and we fly out, right? And you don't want to be that leader who just comes and points out what you do wrong. You do want to create a more holistic picture so that person understands that you see their value, you see their worth. And what I've understood and what I've witnessed, Marjana, is when I tell you that I believe you can do this and that you're better than that, people will rise to the occasion.
Oh, that is such great advice. I just, again, that vulnerability, that open communication, that feedback, people want that. They want to feel valued, seen, and heard, all those things, but they want to also know they're providing value back, right?
If I want to go from New York to California, there's several routes to get there. And many times, those closest to the customer, those closest to the business, see and hear at a level that I can't perceive from where I'm sitting. And so it's really important to make sure that you have that voice of the customer, but also that voice of the associate to really understand what's happening. Too often as a leader, information gets filtered as it comes up. And if you're not careful, you have a team of people who tell you what they think you want to hear and not what you need to hear.
Mm. Clearly, you're approving my opening, what I said, that you were in the trenches. I mean, you really got in the trenches with your people as a leader in these iconic companies. And, because you've had such deep experience, we talk about the how, right? How do we get things done? What do you think it was about your roles in some of these companies that created change? What was the biggest how factor for you?
A few things. One, I was never afraid to roll up my sleeves. And so I kid you not, when I went to work for Walmart, number one retailer, I did every job in the store because I wanted to understand at a very tactical level, what was it like to be a cashier? What was it like to change oil? What was it like to fry chicken or to bake bread or to ice a cake? And in doing that, a few things happened. One, I got an appreciation of what it takes to be successful. The associates appreciated me taking that time, and it also helped me think through the business differently because I'm able to see the gaps and the things that maybe we need to look at differently to move the business forward, to increase customer satisfaction. And so it's really getting in, understanding the day-to-day operation, not to a level that I'm an expert, but that I'm knowledgeable enough to see and live through the eyes and walk in the shoes of the folks who do this every day.
Clearly, you're a man of great strategy. And one of the other strategies we've talked about that you've used over the years is the PEP strategy. It is what? Performance, exposure, and perception. Can you share a little bit about how that has been a tool in your leadership over the years?
I came upon the concept of PEP when I looked at what it took to be successful as a leader, as a business leader. And 50% of that equation is performance. You've got to be a consistent performer over time. You can't be a one-hit wonder or a Milli Vanilli. So 50% of what I needed to be successful as a professional was performance. 25% was what I called exposure. And that's exposure to the information I needed to know, exposure to the business needs, how we make money in this organization, exposed to those ideas. And then the last P I call perception. And that is basically, what is my brand? What is it I bring to the table? What is it that you get when Keith Wyche walks into a room? And so that works as an individual, but it also works for a business or an organization, because the performance is, hey, am I delivering what I said I was going to deliver as a business, no matter what industry? Am I delivering to you, the consumer, the shareholder, the customer, what I said I would deliver? From an exposure perception, do you understand, or have I done a good job of making sure you understand our strategy and why we're doing what we're doing? That brand promise. And then the perception is, are we living up to that brand promise? There are many companies who will have a brand promise that they're not delivering on. And that does no one any good. And so when I think about PEP from the business or organizational perspective, it's making sure that our performance and our strategy is clear, that from an exposure standpoint, it's articulate, and we know, and customers know, and investors know what it is we're trying to accomplish. And then perception, we're matching what we say with what we do.
What I think is so great about that strategy is that it is so potent at the organizational level, but it also, on the flip side, can be very personal. And I know this is something that you've taken to heart as you've led people, you as sort of a chief people officer, although I don't believe you ever held that exact title. Am I wrong?
I have not had that exact title, but let's be clear. Nothing gets done without people. And human capital is really the most important thing on the balance sheet. It's the people who get it done.
Yeah. And so that PEP strategy, or I like to say PEP, you call it PEP, but it's very peppy. I love the energy around it. Have you used that with your people? When have you helped them say, hey, your performance is great, but you need a little more on the exposure. Nobody knows it. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people struggle with. And maybe we've learned or been taught to be too humble, but we need to talk about the things we're doing and how we're doing them differently. How are you encouraging, or how have you encouraged your employees to do just that?
Yeah, I make it very clear that no one reaches the top of any organization by themselves. Before you can break that glass ceiling, someone who's on the other side of that glass ceiling has to look down, see you, see the value that you bring, and pull you through. And so it's not just enough to be a top performer. You really have to make sure that you have a personal value proposition that is understood and articulated, and that you provide thought leadership, that you're a continuous learner, and that you stay current so that you can remain relevant. And those are the things that leaders look for: team players, people who move the business forward. And if you have those traits, and if you exemplify those in the PEP method, you tend to get recognized, and you'll find sponsors and mentors to help move your career along.
Mm. So many great pieces of guidance. Thank you so much, Keith. I do want to be mindful of our time and keeping this to that 15 minutes, but I do want to just close on, if anyone, any leader, and I'm talking personal leadership here too. We keep talking about personal agency, and we each have to rise up because times are changing so fast. Leaders cannot, do this on their own. What advice do you have for anyone listening right now about how to get the best out of their performance, that exposure, that perception out there as they move forward in these fast-paced days?
I'll answer it from a leadership perspective. And what I mean by that is, no matter what the mission or the strategy is, you have to make sure that you take time to, what I say, explain the why. Why are we doing it? And then what's going to happen if we don't do it? And then what's in it for you? And actually connect that person to the vision. If I'm a leader, I have to make sure that person understands the vision and how they fit into it. And so, for example, you're in the retail business, that cashier, he or she is so important because he or she is the last line of defense for that shopping experience. And so I can go to my store, and maybe not everything I want on my list is there, but if I get to that checkout, it's a friendly, fast experience that will color that experience. And you're the last line of defense. And I will leave that store, that shopping experience, feeling really good about your organization. Conversely, if the lines are long, if it's a grumpy cashier, again, that also will color negatively that experience. And so making sure that everyone understands the vision, but more importantly, how they connect to that vision.
Mm. I love that. You're right. It does always begin with that why. Why does this matter? Why are we here? But then knowing that helps you ultimately fulfill that how. And again, I keep saying that you are the man who's going to help us with the how strategy. Thank you so much for the stories and strategies that you shared here. And we look forward to having more conversations with you.
Thank you so much, Mirjana. I enjoyed it.